I want to draw your attention back to Myanmar. That is where the epicenter of the earthquake struck yesterday at 12:50 p.m. local time at a magnitude of 7.7. And for that, we can connect with Michael Bossacu. He's a former lead spokesperson for UNICEF during Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar back in 2009. He was one of the few foreign first responders granted access during that disaster. Michael, great to be able to speak to you today about this, to get your unique insight into how challenging it is to get aid into Myanmar. Just give us your sense of how things are, especially since that military coup in 2001 has turned the country into quite a bit of chaos.
Exactly. Good to be with you, Steve. Well, to give you context, back in 2008, Cyclone Nargis, the death toll was enormous. About 135,000 dead and 2.4 million in dire need of humanitarian aid. Hopefully what happened back then won't happen again. What happened back then, as you mentioned, I was part of the UNICEF team, the military government waited a long time in order to have us arrive on the scene there because they vetted each visa individually. Cyclone Nargis happened in the Irrawaddy Delta in the south, considered pretty much an opposition area. But to give you context there, I noted that the U.S. has just offered assistance in this current disaster. But back in 2008, there were 4 U.S. ships led by the USS Essex with 14 choppers, 1,000 Marines. They were steaming off the coast of Myanmar for several weeks. They weren't allowed in and they left. So hopefully that won't happen this time. And of course, we also have to remember this time is different in the sense that USAID has pulled back globally. Something like 30% of the humanitarian aid funds are gone because of that pullback. So very, very challenging on top of all the other logistical problems.
Yeah, very difficult with the timing of that withdrawal of USAID and the aid that America has or used to provide in the past. In their absence, though, we have seen other countries step up. We've seen that some rescue teams from China have been dispatched to Myanmar to help. We've seen that India as well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has issued orders to send supplies to help as well. Do you find it at least encouraging that other countries are stepping up and that it's happening within 24 hours of this earthquake that's happened?
It is encouraging, although I think we're finding more and more with these disasters, Steve, we're finding kind of the intersection between natural disasters and geopolitics. So the Myanmar military generals first call on their best buddies. China, I see that Russia is now sending a team. They're leaning on India and then also ASEAN countries. But it's important to note that both China and Russia are kind of in a competition in Myanmar, especially in the north, to get access to its natural resources. In fact, I just saw in the new Light of Myanmar, the official mouthpiece of the government, that they celebrated a defense day with the Russians just a few hours before the earthquake. So it goes to show you how close those ties are. But also one more thing, of course, Thailand is struggling a bit from the impact on their lands, and they may not be in a strong position as they normally would to help their neighbor.
Yeah, and just talk us through some of the logistics that will be involved in trying to get aid into Myanmar. It is a significantly large country, and the earthquake's reach, I mean, it struck in Mandalay and it's affected buildings all the way down here in Bangkok, over 1,000 kilometers away.
Yeah, hugely difficult. I mean, in normal times, one would deal with closed airports and fallen bridges and that sort of thing. But we also have a huge insurgency going on. The military government is in control, I think, of less than a quarter of the country. 3 million people displaced before the earthquake. And a lot of the key people that would normally attend to these sorts of disasters, health workers, for example, have fled Myanmar. Everything depends on access. So normally, the UN, which has a big headquarters in Bangkok, would have agreements with ministries and they would go in. So with the military government not having control of much of the country, these entities, like the UN, are going to have to deal with what we call non-state actors, and that can be very, very difficult sometimes. And then also just, the things like visas and, getting fuel, petrol, that sort of thing is very, very difficult right now. Hopefully, they will not create the same barriers as they did in 2008, where, for example, in my case, the UN Secretary General had to submit visas on an individual basis to the Myanmar government. They vetted him, and then we could come in. So hopefully that won't happen this time. They're very paranoid of foreigners coming in.
Yes, and even foreign media as well, also facing challenges getting in to be able to cover this story. And Michael Bosicu there, thanks so much for giving me your insights and sharing what the challenges of getting aid into Myanmar are like.